A winter of shattered vows. Paris returns to Los Angeles with a child claiming Liam Spencer as the father. The winter sun had barely lifted over Los Angeles when the city was shaken by an emotional quake that would soon ripple through every corner of the Logan, Forrester, and Spencer worlds. Just hours earlier, Hope Logan and Liam Spencer had exchanged vows beneath glowing lights and soft floral arrangements, embracing each other with a renewed sense of purpose. Their wedding was meant to be the close of one chapter and the hopeful beginning of another, a union reaffirmed, sanctified, and witnessed by family members who believed, perhaps naively, that the turbulence which had defined Lope for more than a decade had finally found its resting place. But fate, as always, had other plans. And this time, destiny arrived not quietly, not gently, but in the form of Paris Buckingham, returning to Los Angeles with a child in her arms and a truth on her lips sharp enough to cut through every fragile dream Hope and Liam had built. Paris's arrival was nothing short of cinematic, a sudden figure on familiar ground, no warning, no preamble, as though she had been conjured by the shadows of the past rather than by the present. She stepped into the aftermath of a wedding that had been filled with laughter, tenderness, and unguarded hope, a wedding that symbolized forgiveness and healing after years of broken trust. The contrast between celebration and revelation could not have been more brutal. She stood poised, composed in a way that made the moment even more devastating, her eyes holding the exhaustion of a woman who had rehearsed her confession countless times but never found a version that felt right. And beside her, holding tightly to her hand, was a toddler, perhaps 2 years old, whose existence shifted the air the moment he appeared. The murmurs began before Paris said a word. But when she did, when she opened her mouth and let the buried truth spill out, the world of the newlywed couple shattered. "He is Liam Spencer's son." Finishing the sentence felt like slicing open her own chest, but she did not flinch. She owed the truth to her child. She owed it to herself. And she owed it to the man whose life she was about to upend. The silence that followed was suffocating. Hope's breath caught in her throat. Liam went pale, the kind of pale that suggested not shock alone but recognition of a night he had spent years trying to bury beneath layers of regret, denial, and self-preservation. The night with Paris, the night he crossed a boundary he had never confessed, the night he had convinced himself was better forgotten, had finally returned, embodied now in a living child staring at him with eyes too familiar to dismiss. Before Hope could even find the strength to speak, Liam felt the weight of something ancient and heavy press against his chest. Memory, remorse, disbelief. The night came flooding back to him, uninvited, unstoppable. He had tried to bury it beneath routine, beneath apologies, beneath attempts to be better. That night had been carved into the darkest corner of his conscience, sealed with shame so deep he had never dared revisit it, not even in dreams. And now here it was, breathing, standing, staring at him with the innocence of a child who had no part in the sins of adults. Paris watched Liam carefully, searching his face for denial, for anger, for trembling fragments of recognition. She found all three, layered, conflicting, tangled together in a storm he could not contain.
He could not speak.
He could not breathe. And in his silence, Hope's heart began to fracture. Hope Logan Spencer had spent years accepting the fractured nature of loving a man like Liam. She had forgiven him for betrayals, welcomed him home after missteps, believed in the goodness that battled against his impulsivity. Their love had survived triangles, temptations, secrets, shattered promises. It had survived almost everything. But this was different. This was not a mistake of emotion or loyalty. This was a lie woven into the fabric of time. This was a child, conceived long enough ago that the truth had lingered in Paris's silence for years. Hope stared at the little boy, her vision blurring, her throat tightening, her body stiffening as if bracing for an impact that had already landed. The room tilted around her. The vows she had spoken only hours earlier echoed in her ears. Promises of honesty, partnership, unity. She had given Liam her whole heart once more, believing that history no longer held dominion over their future. Now, that future was collapsing beneath her feet. And Liam, caught between past and present, was sinking into memories he had tried desperately to forget. The night with Paris had not been romantic nor planned. It had been born of vulnerability, confusion, emotional collapse. He remembered feeling lost, believing he had been betrayed when he hadn't. He remembered seeking comfort in the wrong place. He remembered waking the next morning consumed with regret, panic, and the crushing certainty that if Hope ever found out, it would destroy her. So he swore to himself it would never be spoken. He thought silence could erase truth. But truth, as he learned today, survives even the most determined attempts to bury it. Paris had not come for revenge. She had not come to ruin a wedding or destroy a marriage. She had come because secrets have expiration dates, and this one had reached its limit. For 2 years, she had raised her son alone, nurturing him with the strength and tenderness she had inherited from her mother, shielding him from a world of judgment and complication. She had studied his face every day, seeing Liam in the curve of his smile, the shape of his eyes, the tilt of his head. And she had known, deep down, that no matter how frightening the consequences, she could not let her son grow up without knowing the truth of who he was. The emotional fallout was immediate and devastating. Hope stepped back as though pulling away from a fire. Her chest heaved, but she fought for composure, for dignity. She had become too accustomed to heartbreak to let herself collapse in public now. But inside, she was breaking in places she did not know could still fracture. Her mind replayed every moment of the wedding, the way Liam held her hands, the tremor in his voice, the tears in his eyes, and realized now that something had always been buried beneath his words. A memory he could not escape. A truth he was too afraid to confront. Liam reached for her, instinctively, desperately, but she recoiled. It was not rejection born of anger, but of disbelief. She could not understand how he had stood before her and spoken vows while this truth remained unspoken. Her heart pounded in her ears. She felt betrayed not just by the past, but by the present, the timing, the silence, the years lost to lies. Paris, watching them, felt guilt settle heavily into her bones. She had wanted to tell Liam long before now, but life had become a series of complications, distractions, fears. She had convinced herself that revealing the truth would disrupt lives that were not hers to shape. But raising her son had forced her to confront the reality that no child deserves to carry the burden of a hidden identity. And so, she returned, not to destroy, but to liberate. Yet liberation often leaves destruction in its wake. As the truth spiraled into the air, Liam's internal world began collapsing. The facade of stability he had tried to maintain for years crumbled under the weight of consequences he had always feared but never truly believed would come. He saw the pain in Hope's eyes, the betrayal in her trembling hands, and something inside him shattered. He had always believed he could outrun his past, but now the past had found him, brought to life through a little boy who shared his blood. Liam's guilt was overwhelming, not simply because he had fathered a child, but because he had allowed that truth to remain hidden while promising Hope honesty. That contradiction tore at him, forcing him to confront the selfishness in his silence. He had claimed to love Hope enough to devote his life to her, yet he had chosen self-preservation over integrity. The child, innocent and unaware of the emotional chaos surrounding him, clung to Paris's leg, watching strangers sob, flinch, freeze. His presence, so small yet so powerful, forced everyone to recognize that the truth was no longer theoretical. It had a heartbeat. It had a face. It had a future. Hope's turmoil spiraled into something raw and overwhelming. Her entire body felt hollow, her chest constricting as she struggled to breathe. She looked at Paris, not with hatred, but with shock so profound it left her numb. She looked at Liam, searching for answers she already knew she would not receive. And she looked at the child, the proof of a night she never knew existed, and felt the ground beneath her vanish. Inside her mind, Hope replayed every promise Liam had ever made, every apology, every assurance that the past would not repeat itself. And here it was, repeating itself in a way more devastating than anything she had previously endured. For Liam, the guilt morphed into something deeper: fear. Fear of losing hope. Fear of failing the child. Fear of repeating the mistakes that had already nearly destroyed him. Memories collided with reality, leaving him overwhelmed by the weight of consequences he could not escape. Paris, though strong, felt tears gathering. She had never intended to hurt Hope. In fact, she respected her deeply. But secrets, especially ones rooted in the lives of innocent children, have a way of eroding even the strongest intentions. The emotional storm expanded rapidly. Hope's shock turned into a quiet, devastating grief. Liam's guilt metastasized into panic. Paris's resolve trembled under the pressure of judgment and consequence. And through it all, the child remained the eye of the storm, radiating innocence, while adults suffered the repercussions of their decisions. What unfolded in the hours that followed was not rage, not chaos, but silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Hope needed space. Liam needed answers. Paris needed understanding. And none of them knew how to take the first step. Hope's mind raced through a maze of contradictions. She understood intellectually that the child was not to blame. But emotionally, she could not separate the child's existence from the betrayal that now defined her marriage. She mourned the life she thought she had secured. She mourned the trust she thought she had rebuilt. She mourned the dream she had believed in so fiercely that she walked down the aisle with a heart full of hope and forgiveness. And now, that hope felt like a cruel irony. Meanwhile, Liam wrestled with a storm of emotions: self-loathing, fear, love, regret. He knew he should go to Hope, should speak, should explain. But he also knew his words would sound empty. How could he ask for understanding when he had withheld truth? How could he ask for forgiveness when he had not trusted her with his darkest moment? Every possibility led him toward a future in which he stood alone, without hope, without trust, without a family united under the vows they had spoken just hours earlier. As Paris watched the unraveling, she felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness for the pain she had caused, relief for the truth that was finally spoken. She knew this moment was inevitable. She had rehearsed it, dreaded it, prepared for it. But no amount of preparation could soften the blow of reality. And still, one question lingered in the air, heavy with consequence. What happens now? How does Hope rebuild trust from ashes? How does Liam reconcile his past with his future? How does Paris navigate the fallout of doing the right thing at the worst possible moment? And how does a child, innocent, bright, unaware, fit into a family fractured by betrayal? The revelation of Paris's child becomes the catalyst for a seismic shift in the emotional architecture of their world. It forces each character to confront hidden truths, buried desires, unresolved guilt. It demands honesty, vulnerability, and reckoning. Hope must decide whether love is enough to survive a betrayal of this magnitude. Liam must confront the man he once was, the man he claims to be, and the father he must now become. Paris must stand firm in her truth, even as the consequences ripple outward. And the child, unknowing, untouched by fault, must be embraced, understood, and protected. In the end, this storyline is not about Paris's return. It is not about scandal or shock. It is about the breaking of illusions, the confrontation of hidden pasts, the unraveling of vows that were meant to protect hearts, not bury truths. The beginning of a new storm, one that will test the strength, identity, and resilience of every person caught in its path. The winter that began with a wedding now deepens into something colder, sharper, more unforgiving. Because sometimes the most devastating storms come not from the sky, but from the past we thought would never return. A fractured winter. The DNA test that destroyed Hope and forced Liam to face his past. The days following Paris Buckingham's shocking revelation shifted the emotional landscape of Los Angeles in ways no one could have predicted. What had begun as a season of celebration, a long-awaited wedding, renewed vows, dreams of stability finally within reach, had now devolved into a winter of unraveling truths. For Hope Logan Spencer, the world she had stitched together with so much patience and forgiveness was splitting at the seams. For Liam Spencer, the man she had chosen again and again despite every wound he had inflicted, the past he buried had clawed its way back to the surface, undeniable and unforgiving. And for Paris, carrying not only a child but a truth she could no longer contain, the moment of confession became the beginning of an emotional storm far greater than she had ever anticipated. In the immediate aftermath, chaos did not erupt in shouting or accusations. Instead, a chilling stillness settled over everyone, the kind that often follows a devastating impact, the breathless pause as hearts and minds try to comprehend the magnitude of what has happened.
Hope could barely stand.
Liam could barely breathe. Paris could barely meet their eyes. And the child, unaware of the tectonic plates shifting beneath him, clung to Paris's hand as though sensing the world had suddenly become a much more dangerous place. Yet silence could not shield them from what needed to come next. The doubt hanging in the air, not only from Hope, but from Brooke, Ridge, Steffi, Wyatt, Bill, and nearly everyone who heard the news, grew heavier with each passing hour. The implications were too severe, the timing too brutal, the history too complicated to rely on words alone. And so, under mounting pressure and driven by a desperate need for clarity, Liam demanded a DNA test. He had barely slept since the revelation. His mind raced in circles, returning again and again to that night with Paris, to his shame, to the guilt he had swallowed for years, to the vows he had spoken to Hope with trembling sincerity. The possibility that he was the child's father was not a surprise, no matter how deeply he wished it were. The uncertainty, however, tortured him. He needed the truth. He owed it to everyone, to the child, to Paris, to Hope, to himself. When the results arrived, there was no dramatic pause, no theatrical flourish. The truth came in cold, clinical text. The match was conclusive. Liam Spencer was the father. In that moment, everything inside him collapsed. There is a particular kind of devastation that comes from seeing the consequences of one's buried sins laid bare, a devastation that strips a person to their core. Liam had feared this result, but fear is abstract, until the moment it solidifies into fact. That fact wrapped itself around him like ice. Not because he did not want the child, not because he lacked the capacity to love, but because this truth meant his entire life, his marriage, his identity, the illusion of stability, had been built on a foundation already cracked beneath the weight of secrets. Hope's reaction was immediate yet eerily silent. She did not scream. She did not fall into hysterics. She stood motionless, staring at the paper that confirmed her greatest nightmare. Her heart did not break all at once. It fractured slowly, painfully, in a series of quiet internal implosions, each memory of love, of trust, of reconciliation caving under the pressure of betrayal. Just days earlier, she had walked down an aisle bathed in soft winter light, believing she was stepping into a future shaped by truth and forgiveness. She had placed her hand in Liam's, believing the past was behind them. She had looked into his eyes and seen the man she wanted to build a life with. And now, she felt foolish for believing that this time, things would be different. That this time, Liam would not let history repeat itself. But history had not simply repeated. It had expanded. It had multiplied. It had produced a child. Hope's grief did not take the shape of anger, not at first. It took the shape of betrayal so deep it felt like a physical wound. She questioned everything, every apology Liam had ever given, every promise he had ever made, every smile that had reassured her. She questioned whether she had misunderstood the man she married, whether she had romanticized his flaws, whether she had been desperate enough for love to ignore the signs that Liam was incapable of truly changing. The presence of the child made her heartbreak more complex. This was not a mistress, not a flirtation. not a triangle she had learned to navigate. This was a human being, innocent, vulnerable, blameless. A child who carried half of Liam's DNA. A child who would need a father. A child who, regardless of how much she tried to control her emotions, would forever represent the night Liam abandoned Fidelity. Hope felt trapped in an emotional labyrinth. She questioned whether she could accept this child into her life, whether she could look at him without reliving her husband's betrayal. She wondered whether loving this child would mean erasing her own pain, swallowing it until it consumed her from the inside. She wondered whether rejecting the child would make her heart smaller, colder, incapable of compassion. Every path forward felt like a betrayal of someone, either Liam, the child, or herself. Yet the DNA test did more than shatter Hope's marriage. It forced Liam into a reckoning he could no longer avoid. He now had a child he never knew existed, a child who needed his presence, his support, his name. The moment the test confirmed paternity, Liam's instincts shifted. Fear and guilt remained, but beneath them stirred something primal: responsibility. He could not run. He could not deny. He could not hide. Whatever happened to his marriage, he had a son to protect, to guide, to claim. The weight of that reality was overwhelming. He imagined the boy growing up, asking why his father was absent for the first years of his life. He imagined Paris explaining that she had been too afraid to come forward. He imagined Hope resenting every moment he spent with the child. He imagined himself torn between two worlds, forever failing one while trying to salvage the other. This fear fed into a deeper fear, that he would become the man he had always sworn he would never be: unreliable, untrustworthy, unworthy of the people who loved him. And then there was Paris. In the days after revealing the truth, Paris found herself caught in a storm of judgment, speculation, and emotional crossfire. She had expected anger. She had expected disbelief. But she had not expected to be so profoundly misunderstood. The world around her began assigning motives she had never voiced: that she wanted financial support, that she wanted revenge, that she wanted Liam for herself. Rumors spread like wildfire, exaggerated by the emotional chaos of Hope's breakdown and Liam's unraveling. Paris felt her identity slipping through her fingers as the narrative shifted. In their eyes, she was no longer a mother doing the difficult, painful thing by revealing the truth. She was a threat,
A wedge.
a disruptor, a woman whose presence had detonated a marriage before it even had the chance to settle into stability. And yet Paris was not naive. She understood why people questioned her intentions. The timing was catastrophic. The history between her and Liam was messy, blurred by vulnerability and secrecy. And she knew that beneath their grief, beneath their anger, people were searching for someone to blame. It was easier to cast Paris as manipulative than to confront the uncomfortable truth. The real betrayal had not been her silence, but Liam's actions. Still, beneath her steadfastness lay her own unresolved wounds. The night she spent with Liam had never been about seduction or strategy. It had been two people drowning in emotional confusion, seeking comfort in the wrong place. But afterward, when she became pregnant, she felt abandoned, not because Liam owed her love, but because he owed her acknowledgement. When she realized he had chosen to lock the memory of that night away, she felt a sting of resentment that only grew as she carried their child alone. She raised her son without Liam's presence, without his support, without his name, and she had done so with strength. But that strength came at a cost. And now, as she watched Hope suffer, watched Liam crumble, watched her child thrust into a world built on legacy, conflict, and scandal, Paris began to question her own motivations. Had she revealed the truth solely for her son? Or had a quiet, subconscious part of her wanted Liam to feel the absence she had felt? Had she wanted recognition, not just of her child, but of the pain she endured alone? These doubts tormented her, weaving themselves into the narrative others imposed on her. She feared that no matter what she did, she would be painted as either the villain or the opportunist. Her intentions, no matter how sincere, would be dissected and misinterpreted. As the days passed, The emotional fallout only deepened. Hope withdrew from the world, isolating herself in a cocoon of grief and confusion. She replayed every moment of her relationship with Liam, searching for signs she had missed, for clues about the night with Paris. Her mind oscillated between compassion for the child and revulsion toward the circumstances of his conception. She wanted to forgive Liam, but forgiveness felt impossible when the wound was still open, raw, and bleeding. Liam tried to reach her, but she could not bear to see him. He tried to explain, but she could not bear to hear him. Her heart was not hardened. It was shattered. And shattered hearts do not respond to reasoning. They respond only to time, space, and the slow rebuilding of trust. Liam, caught between the collapsing world of his marriage and the fragile new responsibility of fatherhood, felt immobilized. He wanted to protect Hope, to comfort her, to beg for forgiveness, but he also wanted to hold his son, to be present, to make up for lost time. Every choice felt like betrayal. Every path felt like punishment. The internal war consumed him. Paris found herself increasingly isolated as well. She felt judged by some, pitted by others, resented by many. Even though she had told the truth because she believed it was the right thing to do, she could not ignore the possibility that the right thing sometimes has devastating consequences. But beneath all the turmoil, beneath the heartbreak and suspicion and fear, one truth remained constant. The child deserved love, stability, and honesty. And the adults, Liam, Hope, Paris, would have to find a way to build a life around that truth without destroying each other in the process. The question that lingered in every heart was simple, painful, and unavoidable. Could Hope ever accept this child into her life? Could Liam repair the fractured trust he had once again broken? Could Paris rebuild her reputation while protecting her son? And could any of them find a version of love, family, and identity that survived the truth? The DNA test had not merely revealed paternity. It had revealed character. It had revealed weakness. It had revealed pain. It had revealed the buried fractures in every relationship touched by this truth. What comes next will not be easy for any of them. Healing rarely is. But in the world of the bold and the beautiful, the most seismic emotional shifts often lead to the most transformative stories. And this story, born of betrayal, truth, innocence, and consequence, is only beginning.